Welcome to our presentation. We are Tu Hường and Bảo Trâm from Group 11. Our topic is about feudalism in China. China is not only considered to be a country having no ancient civilization history, but also one of the countries contained feudal society in period. It is described in ancient history of China that feudalism worked at a scale of Europe feudalism, in which king provides army and money on demand bestowed land on his noble. So Chinese feudal system has long interesting history. When we discuss about the role of Chinese feudal, it is necessary to understand the famous feudal dynasty of ancient China. But with the passage of time, many ups and downs occur. The definition of feudalism in China refers to a location of a certain area or region to a specific individual who becomes the established leader of that region. The term also refers to the shared power system between regional. The concept of feudalism in China dates back to the 11th century BC to the Shang and Zhou dynasty. Despite the fact that feudalism is typically marked by military takeover, 20th century historians suggest that Chinese system differ from European feudal government in that Chinese lords own allegiance to the king due to kingship rather than by law. Further, Chinese peasants were not legally bound to the land like European. The Zhou dynasty lasted longer than any other dynasty in Chinese history, and the use of iron was introduced to ancient China during this time. In Chinese history, the Zhou dynasty marked the beginning of feudal phase of Chinese history, a period which is said to extend to the fall of Qing dynasty in 1911. The larger Zhou era region was separated by a network of feudal states was ruled over by kings. The king of Zhou only had direct control over a small portion of the dominion and established acknowledgement from the feudal state. The first part of the Zhou era was called the Western Zhou. It was a fairly peaceful time, but the Zhou king lost his authority and seven prominent states emerged. This era was divided into three periods: the Western Zhou dynasty, the Spring and Autumn periods, and the Warring State periods. It marked the transition from tribal society to feudal society. Confucius. There were many other prominent philosophers. There was Lao Tse, who was the founder of Taoism, advocating the return to nature and doing nothing in following the course of nature. Lao Tse suggested that if there are no laws, there will be no laws to break, and there will be no criminal. Under the Zhou feudal society, the relationship was based on kinship, and the contractual nature was not precise, whereas in the European model, the lords and vassals had specific mutual obligations and duties. Middle European feudalism realized the classic case of the noble lord, while in the middle and later phases of the Chinese feudal society, the classic case of the landlord system was still found. In Europe, feudal lordship was a hereditary and irrevocable, were passed on from generation to generation, and could be revoked. The middle serf was born to the land and could not live and dispose of it, whereas the peasant was free to live, or if he had the means, to purchase the land in small parcels. Moreover, in Europe, feudalism was also considered to be a part an economic system in which the lord who were at the top of the structure, followed by vassals, and then the peasants who were tied to the land and were responsible for the production. It's very important for you to understand the feudal system in China. Feudal hierarchy is in China a pyramid shape having the peasants or lower class at the bottom of the pyramid, whereas the king or lords reside at the top of this pyramid. This pyramid is the to be widest at the lower level and is the to squeeze down the wide while growing upward. This pyramid of feudal system detected everyone like the intent of power increased from bottom to top with the king possessing the maximum power. The pyramids of the feudal system were broadly categorized as the king, the lords, and nobles, peasants, or serfs. These are discussed briefly as below. The king owned on the land in the country and made the law. He gave an area of land called a fight to rich lords and nobles. In return, the lords and nobles agreed to supply the king with soldiers and horses for his army. The noble gave some land to professional soldiers. In return, the lives fought for noble and the king. Peasants worked the land for the noble and the life who in turn offered them.
Regarding philosophy and religion, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are considered the three pillars of ancient Chinese society. They not only influence spirituality, but also government, science, the arts, and social structure. Though closer to a philosophy than a true religion, Confucianism was a way of life for ancient Chinese people. The founder of Confucianism, named Confucius, lived from 551 to 479 BCE. Confucianism became the dominant political philosophy during the Han Dynasty. Because Confucian teachings were conservative and taught people to maintain their role in social order, the philosophy was used by the state to keep the status quo from that time forward. Taoism is a Chinese religion that developed a bit after Confucianism, around 2,000 years ago. In contrast to Confucianism, Taoism is mainly concerned with the spiritual elements of life, including the nature of the universe. About Buddhism, after founding in India, Buddhism spread to and became popular in Chinese in the 1st century CE. As Buddhism became more prevalent, its concepts merged with Taoist and Confucian ideas to become the basis of ancient Chinese society and government. Its influence is seen in Chinese art, architecture, and literature. A majority of people in ancient China were peasant farmers. Although they were respected because of the food they provided for the rest of the Chinese, they lived tough and difficult lives. The typical farmer lived in a small village of around 100 families. They worked in small family farms. Although they had plows and sometimes used animals like dogs and oxen to do the work, most of the work was done by hand. Farmers had to work for the government for about 1 month each year. They served in the military or worked for construction projects like building canals, palaces, and city walls. Farmers also had to pay a tax by giving the government a percentage of their crops. Life was much different for those living in the city. People in the cities worked a variety of jobs including merchants, craftsmen, government officials, and scholars. Many cities in ancient China grew very large, with some having populations totaling hundreds or thousands of people. The cities of China were surrounded with formidable walls made from packed dirt. Each night the gates were locked shut and no one was allowed to enter or leave the city after dark. Regarding family life, 3 generations usually all lived in the same house. A big part of Chinese family life was the respect for the elders. Children of all ages, even grown-ups, were required to respect their parents. This respect continued even after people were dead. The Chinese would often pray for their ancestors and offer sacrifice to them. By Zhou dynasty, Chinese society was decidedly patriarchal with female and male social roles determined by the strict feudal hierarchy. In theory, such division was supposed to guarantee morality and social order. The Chinese family was ruled by the father of the house. His wife and children were required to obey him in all things. The only main role of the wife was to be servant to their husbands and to produce sons so the son could carry on the family's name. It was reasonable for his husband to remarry if his wife cannot bear him a son. There were limited occupations or jobs for women. Education for women was not popular or at times not allowed, but they could receive limited education to enable them to teach their sons. The textile industry, however, often employed numerous female workers. Women were skilled in Chinese silk weaving. Other occupations include sales in traditional markets or entertainers. Women were often not respected if they weren't married, and it is extremely hard for women to be self-reliant in ancient China.